So, the photographs of Boris Johnson are quite remarkable. There he was in the Commons yesterday. This is the Daily Telegraph, saying the Prime Minister insisting he will fight on, despite what the paper calls an overwhelming mutiny. But these are the photographs in subsequent papers where there's something quite... Oh, it's not that one, sorry.
Quite chilling about some of it, isn't there?
Chilling headlines and chilling photographs.
Yeah. If you look at them as we go, we'll go through the rest of the papers. This is The Sun this morning. You'll have to dip your hands in blood to get rid of me, as it quotes an unnamed ally of Boris Johnson, accusing dissenters of overthrowing the elected will of the people.
Daily Express, back me or face political oblivion. It outlines Mr Johnson's defence for remaining in number 10. I mean, he just looks like a... I know it's just a photograph of him on his own, but the whole atmosphere of him isolated, but determined to go nowhere. It's quite iconic there.
Yeah, and then this one on the Daily Mail, no different. Boris stares down the mutiny. It's that same picture. It's their take on the ongoing crisis. The Prime Minister warns the country that it will be plunged into chaos if he is ousted. We're joined by the former Labour Party advisor, Aisha Hazarika, and political sketch writer for The Times, Quentin Letts. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Lovely to see you both with us. Just a quiet sort of 24 hours, Aisha, in the world of politics. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Susanna and I, we were talking before the programme. It feels like there's been a slight turn in the sense of what's happening at number 10. Boris Johnson clinging on in the face of 46 resignations and one sacking of Michael Gove, and yet he is refusing to stand down.
I mean, it is now in the realms of it actually feels surreal to watch what is happening in Downing Street. And also just to take a step back, it feels like this is quite a big, dangerous moment for our democracy and from a constitutional point of view. And I was speaking yesterday, I was presenting all afternoon yesterday on the radio, and so many commentators coming on just saying this is genuinely unprecedented. When Theresa May saw the writing was on the wall, Margaret Thatcher, you know, when leaders know that they have lost the room and they've lost the party, it's painful, it's difficult, but they will go. I mean, I think what we're witnessing now is the kind of thing that if we saw, and I say this in a very patronising way, in some faraway, distant country, we'd say, oh, this is just, you know, this is terrible, this is not democratic. This is where things feel like they are heading.
This is what we criticise other leaders in other countries for, losing the support of their own party, you know, allegations of... you know, there have been allegations of corruption, haven't there, over contracts.
Absolutely.
There have been rumours of, you know, I mean, you know, then we have allegations made about somebody who was the deputy chief whip responsible for welfare, allegations that those weren't taken seriously, that he'd brushed them aside with, you know, pretty unsavoury language. These are all things that you would imagine we would be, Quentin, talking about other leaders and saying, I mean, even Donald Trump. People are comparing Boris Johnson to Donald Trump, who lost the popular vote and insisted on staying.
Yeah, if he doesn't come out this morning and say I'm resigning, then I think there will be more such comparisons. Yesterday was a tricky day, journalistically, for two reasons. One, it was a very fast-moving story, and as a sketch writer, you just didn't know when to press the send button to send your copy, because you were waiting, you know, you were just waiting for the resignation, which is inevitable.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because in your paper, the headline, after more than 40 ministers and aides quit,
yes,
defiant Prime Minister responds by sacking Michael Gove. Of course, even since then, we've had 6 more members of government quitting.
But I was going to say the second reason it was difficult journalistically is we are brought up as reporters to be very careful when discussing mental health. And you shouldn't really use the word madness and lunacy. I used the word lunacy in my column this morning. But this is what was happening yesterday. And the closer you were to it, I was there in the Liaison Committee, sitting about 10 yards away, 10 foot away from Boris Johnson, and looking at him. I looked into his eyes. They were eyes that were looking out, but they were not seeing. And there was... It's very difficult to talk about this, but I'm afraid we are in George III territory. We are in Caligula territory, and somebody needs to go in there. He doesn't have he doesn't seem to have anyone at home who's going to tell him this, and somebody needs to go in, be it a doctor or be it somebody else, who says, come on, take my arm, let's go and have a nice time somewhere.
So, Quentin, your concern is that this isn't just his politically sort of charged, bolstering delusions. This is something more serious than that.
I think that is obvious. I think it is obvious. And, I mean, I'm reluctant to say that for the reason I just laid out. But I think the country will see this. Now, I find it impossible to dislike Boris Johnson. I think a lot of people in the country will feel the same way. But what was happening yesterday was crazy and it was improper and it just cannot be sustained.
But there is this... Look, we disagree on this. I think for many of us... Look, there are many, many people who obviously liked Boris Johnson's Bono me, have I got news for you, I'm this just really hilarious, shambolic, womanising, ha ha ha, it's all a bit of a lie.
Great fun at a party.
Absolutely. Yep. Although you wouldn't want him to drive you home, as Amber Rudd famously sort of said. But for many of us, we saw the darker side and we warned about all of that. I was looking back through some of the columns I wrote back from 2018, calling him, he was going to be Britain's Donald Trump. And I think for a lot of us, we saw not the fun guy, we actually saw quite a nasty piece of work, who was a narcissist, lazy, incompetent, immoral, corrupt, and a liar. And I'm afraid you know how some people make you want to be your best person? He made everyone want to be their worst person. He gave permission to people to be their worst person. And I'm afraid this country is paying a heavy price. Lots of people I know who did vote for Boris Johnson are really angry with themselves now, and they say that we feel that we were misled, and we've paid a dangerous price for that.
Quentin, all of the damage, would it be fair to say that all of the damage that he's facing now, the criticism, is all of his own doing, that he has created this environment around him that Aisha's just described, and actually it's just everything's coming back to him now?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair in some respects. I think you've also got to accept that COVID threw a major spanner in the works. But you were talking earlier about precedents. There have been precedents, actually. Ted Heath, I think it took 4 days to winkle Ted out of number 10. It took Mrs Thatcher a day and a bit between the result of the ballot from Tory MPs and then her accepting that she was going. So it hasn't always been immediate. And I'm reasonably confident that he will be persuaded today to go. But I mean, if he doesn't, then it's going to be bad for him.
What is it that's going to persuade him then? What do you think? What's that moment when it's the clarity? Is it when Nadine Dorries finally turns around and says,
"No, that's never going to happen"?
So would that be?
I think you've got to look at it more psychologically. I think it's got to be someone going in there and being kind to him. It's going back to my point about him being psychologically not quite there at the moment.
Well, Sir Graham Brady was apparently going in there and giving wise counsel.
Yeah, well, he would. I mean, that's the sort of thing.
Look, let me put an alternative view to you, because as you say, there's something a little bit uncomfortable about playing amateur psychologist and diagnosing someone, right? But there is also a position you can imagine the Prime Minister gets into where he convinces himself he is actually the best thing. It is the best thing for the country right now to stay in position, because if he's replaced, then the Conservative Party has a leader who is likely to be electorally less popular than Boris Johnson, because that was an astonishing mandate that he won back in December 2019. Theresa May had not won a mandate like that. And so perhaps he's thinking, look, fine, but I know what's best. It is better for me, for the party. We were elected. And if you get rid of me, you are letting in the Labour Party, the SNP, Lib Dems, a coalition. It would be chaos.
There is a certain moral force to what you say about the mandate and how much of it was personal, how much of it was party. I mean, these are fair points to raise, but we have a parliamentary system whereby the government has to be supported by a majority of MPs, and that is no longer going to be the case.
Well, the other thing that's really important is, despite the fact that Boris Johnson is clinging on to power, 46 people have resigned, one's been sacked. Is there a functioning government at the moment, Aisha? There's all these departments. We were talking about this earlier. But 2 of her boys have done their GCSEs and A-levels. The exams have been done. The education department at the moment is such a hugely important one. It's such an important part of the year for them as well.
Because we're bracing ourselves, of course, for the first results beyond the lockdown,
lockdown,
where they're actually going to be judged by the exams that they've done. And I expect that they'll come, you know, there will be some criticism. Who is currently running the education department in a functioning sense?
I mean, this is why I think this crisis has moved beyond, you know, very dramatic scenes in Westminster. I mean, this is now a crisis that is facing the country. Every single department has been hollowed out now in terms of ministers. Levelling up, arguably, was actually one of the policy agendas that everybody agreed with Boris Johnson when he stood at the step.
And he sacked the head of it, Michael Gove.
Everyone has. I mean, and Michael Gove, sacking Michael Gove. Michael Gove was the person who, you know, whether you liked him or not, he was seen as very clever and very, very sort of competent. But in terms of what is going to make him go, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody yesterday who said that unless this is what they felt, and they had heard a lot of Conservative MPs say this, and people who had been very sympathetic to Boris Johnson, that it's not enough to just say to him, just go voluntarily. They don't think he's going to do that. But they think he actually needs to face this second confidence vote, because unless he sees for himself the raw numbers that people are not supporting him, he almost won't believe it. If he just goes, he might be able to sort of perpetuate a narrative saying, well, I never had the chance to run again and I would have beaten you all. Almost slightly Donald Trump-ish. This is where we are.
OK, Quentin, two things. Could Labour force a vote of no confidence in the government?
Yes.
And could Boris Johnson call a snap election, dissolve Parliament, 1922 committee loses its power, and he runs again?
It's perfectly possible, and this happened with Mrs Thatcher's downfall, that the opposition will call a motion and will have a debate of no confidence. That is perfectly possible. I don't know what the result would be at the moment. Your second point about a general election is a non-starter, because the Queen would say, no, you're not going to have a general election, and the Palace. I mean, the Palace is one possibility of ringing up the Prime Minister and dismissing him. That could happen.
But that would have to be the Queen that says no. That puts the Queen in quite a difficult position.
No, it doesn't particularly, because there are precedents for this, and there are established understandings about how that would work. It really does come down to the man himself. There he is in the bunker, and he's got to understand that the game was up yesterday. And it needs Mrs Johnson, young Carrie, to gather her wits and to take her husband away.
Yeah.